Welcome to the LawyerFair.co.uk daily podcast. LawyerFair helps businesses find the right lawyer at the fairest price. But on this podcast, we just chew the fat with some great guests.
What your passion is, this is what you're really into.
Yeah, obviously, politics has fascinated me since I was 13. I was one of the few kids at school who would go to politics club, etc. So it was really cool.
Okay.
I've grown up in the connected generation, right? So I've been surrounded by technology, and I've grown up utilizing technology as a part of my body as such.
Yeah.
And I always just found it absolutely fascinating. It's like how have we got to this point in time where politics has really failed to embrace that? And I think that's what I'm really trying to address at the moment.
Well, it's fascinating. Well, listen, I'm going to stop you there for a second, Jonny, because I think, as I mentioned to you before, I'm not the one who edits these clips, but I think we will formally be recording by now, and this is now probably part of the podcast event. So just I'll give you a quick introduction. So I'm chatting to Jonny Bottomley. Welcome, Jonny.
Oh, hi, Andrew. Nice to be with you.
Hello, nice to be with you too. Now, as anybody who's listened to the previous podcast or had any remote awareness of LawyerFair will know that we attended an event a couple of weeks ago now called the Pitch Bootcamp, at which we are and have made it through to the final next week. And sharing the stage a couple of weeks ago and again in Bristol in 2 weeks' time was a business or an outfit. Actually, I don't know quite how to describe it, Jonny, but a platform called WHIP, W-H-I-P, which Jonny has launched and is going to explain in much more detail. And I have to say, to your great credit, sir, of all the fine, enthusiastic entrepreneurs and ideas that came up on stage, for me personally, yours was in the zone because you are and have created a platform which enables people, in your words, is going to revolutionise the way that we interact with and influence Parliament.
Yeah, so Andrew, thanks for that.
Yeah, so go for it. Give us a bit more background.
So what we're trying to do with WHIP is we're really trying to break down how people are engaging with politics. We're trying to understand how people are engaging with politics in this current system. And we realise that, people aren't participating. And for a representative democracy to really, truly work, it requires a prerequisite of participation. So what we're trying to do with WHIP is we're trying to change the way that we interact with and influence Parliament. So how we're doing that currently is we are taking information, a long convoluted document, the bills that are going through Parliament, and we're synthesizing that into layman's terms. So we're providing our users on the site a simple synopsis of what that bill actually means, providing them with details of arguments for, impact and costs for that bill. And then our users can then directly on the platform vote either yes or no. And then we can create constituency polls, which we feed to MPs on a daily basis. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the information, break it down, and then provide valuable information for MPs so that their decisions are a lot more informed. So, in a nutshell, that's what we're trying to do, Andrew.
And have you? No, that's fantastic. And so, how long have you been going? Let's go back to the beginning. When did this thing launch?
So we launched our beta in the start of August. We've been working on it since March. But yeah, so far we're doing pretty nicely. We've got about 1,400 active users, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And we're growing at around 35%. So it's starting to get really exciting.
That's brilliant. And in actual terms of how it works, so is there an example? Because I love this fact that you break down what can be fairly complicated pieces of legislation. Is there an example of one you've already done, or is in the frame for coming through the pipeline?
In terms of bills?
Just in terms of an example where there might have been a piece of legislation or a bill which may have been complicated or may have missed the radar of most people because of its complications, and breaking it down into a much more simple form has enabled people to understand it more easily.
Okay, yeah. So let's take what would be a good example? Okay, so there's a bill going through at the moment, a private loans bill regarding the powers of London and whether they should receive more powers in Westminster. So the GLA, should they be deemed to have more powers so they can control and have essentially more control over business rates,
right,
to try and make London a more prosperous city. And if you read the actual document which has been proposed to Parliament, it's around 250 pages, And you're really bashing your head against the wall if you want to read it and actually understand with it. And if you're a citizen of London, that piece of information is going to directly affect your life as soon as it is enacted. And what we see that we're doing is we're really just trying to provide that information to people, so if they want to, they can really understand what's going on and how that's going to affect their lives. So what we did is we simply just presented the arguments for and arguments against, speaking to politicians within Westminster, reading from traditional journalistic lines, and just really gave our users the simple layman's terms arguments. And then from that, we had some really, really interesting comments, some really interesting debates, and we really provided some actual valid information for the MP who is proposing that bill, which is really, really exciting.
Well, I think it's a really important point to make, Jonny, that it's a non-partisan process, isn't it, from your perspective?
Yeah, so we have our core values, which we are trying to stick to. Inevitably, providing a bipartisan perspective is very hard.
Yes.
We are trying to find that centre ground every single time, and we do that through dissemination and delineation. So one person will write the arguments for and against, and it will be read by 10 other journalists or 10 writers, so that from that we break down and make sure that we find and meet that bipartisan mark. And that's really important to us, and it's really something that one of our key goals in going forward is sticking to that bipartisan perspective. Because I really feel that traditional journalism at the moment, it's hyper-partisan, politics is super partisan, journalists are really buying into that. So unfortunately, if people really want to find out about the true essence of some information and politics, it's very hard to find out. So,
well, I must confess that it's the reason why what you're doing chimed with me, because the cold reality, and it's probably always has been the case, is that people get their politics or their political news through the prism of a very partisan channel or organ, be it the press or even the radio, Today program on Radio 4. The editors will have an angle, I suspect, on what they want to drive out of a particular interview or a particular issue. So to have a non-partisan, and of course what you mentioned in our kind of preamble at the very, very early stage of the conversation was to bring the digital age into creating a non-partisan platform like this, I think is really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. I think the internet has essentially changed everything around us. It's changed the way that we interact. It's changed the way that we eat, we shop. It has really failed to have an impact in politics. And I've always found it fascinating as to why that is. Why is it always that politics is usually the last thing to embrace the things that make true impact? And I just really feel that with WHIP we can have that impact if we provide the information in a reliable, bipartisan perspective, and it's something people can instantly latch onto and understand a bill in 1 minute 30. Why can't we change the way that politics works?
Well, let me put my cynic's hat on and throw a bit back at you.
Please do that.
Yeah,
please do.
Come on. What the most obvious thing that springs straight to mind, and I'm not saying this with any political edge at all, is the Iraq War. Okay, so many millions of people against it, 1 million people marched in London. The argument of those that voted, or for many of those who voted for it, was that we voted them in as our politicians, and it's their job to make a decision. Whatever the focus groups tell them. Now, is this going to ultimately change that the MP's perspective that actually it's my job to vote as I see right because you voted me that power? How do you think something like this will change that balance between constituent and MP?
That's really interesting. Taking your war example, I think obviously with the marches and the people power 2 million marching, that really didn't actually have a direct influence on the decisions. And yes, you can say that in a representative democracy, we do elect these people on our behalves. However, with technology which can enable a more deliberative conversation politics, not just make it every 5 years that we engage with it, instead on a day-to-day basis. And if the information that can be provided to MPs is actually credible, I think we cannot necessarily truly direct their the way that they go forward. I can really think we can influence it at least, and try and steer them onto a path. I do think that obviously politicians make very incredibly hard decisions, and they are making decisions for society. And sometimes those decisions are going to be tough, and sometimes they're not. They're going to go against society, because society always is going to take the easy option. Well, not necessarily, but more likely than not, it's going to take the easy option. And sometimes that's not right for the broader picture. So I don't actually agree with direct democracy. I don't think we're now at the point where direct democracy would work, purely for the fact that people aren't really engaged enough, and I don't think they really know enough to be able to make informed decisions every single time. But yeah, I think with the powers of technology as it is, we can at least have a more deliberative conversation, and also try and influence MPs in a more effective way.
Yes, and I suppose the real extreme might be, I don't know if this is the case, but it might be that if I mean, is the data of the voting for each bill on your platform, is that going to be attached to the MP? For example, if there was an MP in my constituency here, and he or she had voted 10 times against the popular mandate via a site like Whip, I mean, would that be explicit? Would that data be available?
Yeah, so what we're working on at the moment is we currently, as a platform stands, you vote, we send your vote to your MP, and we create these constituency polls, and then you can go to your My Vote section, and you can see directly how you've matched up against your MP.
Right.
So say 20 bills, it will give you how your MP voted and how you're voted. So what we're trying to do next is try to take this a little bit forward and create a platform vote. So what percentage of the platform voted yes or no? Oh, yeah. And then we can use that against the broader picture of Westminster and say the yes or no of Westminster. So we can do a direct correlation between the public and Westminster.
Yep.
And I think it'll be really interesting from that, further down the line, after our user base has grown, is we can really present to Westminster to say, okay, our platform of users of this age to this age of this demographic voted this way. However, you guys voted this way. Why is that? And we can offer a platform for an MP to come on and write why they didn't go with how their constituency polled, which would I think would enable politicians to be more humanised, and also bring them to the public, which I think would be really exciting.
Well, no, I think it's really exciting. Just tell me this as we're going to wrap this up. Has the Corbyn effect, or how do I word it? Is the Corbyn effect having any impact on your thinking about Whip's thinking? Or because I'm saying that because he, again, whether you like him or not, he has engaged people, hasn't he, in a way that the previous Oxbridge candidates had completely failed to do. Have you noticed any difference in terms of political engagement in the last few months?
Oh yeah, completely. The Corbyn effect has had. He really, really has transformed the way that this connected generation are starting to engage with politics. You know, he's generally a very nice man. I've met him a number of times.
Right.
And even though I don't completely agree with him on many things, and ideologically I'm different to him, I think the manner he can take himself forward is really interesting. You know, the current problem that the connected generation have with politics is they see it as a very distant thing, something which isn't tangible and isn't very relatable to their lives. Yeah. And Corbyn, through his man on the street persona, is presenting a case where politics can bring change and can come to your town and can actually be visible, which is really quite interesting. And I think what will be exciting going forward is how do the rest of Westminster try and embrace that, because they've understood that this is actually having an effect. People are latching onto this. People are buying into this Corbyn effect. And I think it'd be really interesting maybe how the right and the centre try and embrace that model into their campaigning, into their way, methodology of engaging people. And I think there lies some interesting parallels and interesting correlations going forward.
I agree, and I think that's where something like Whip really fits in, because as you say, the connected generation, Corbyn has engaged with them, hasn't he, in a way that no one else has for many years.
Yeah, exactly, and we're hoping to latch onto that.
No, absolutely. Listen, thank you so much for your time, Jonny. It's a fascinating. Just a final question, actually. I've got too engaged with the political aspects of this, but how do you make your money? What's the business model for Whip?
Okay, that's something we're currently working on, Andrew. Yeah, as all these things, I did this from a perspective of how can we have a big impact in the day-to-day lives of the next generation of politics. And further down the line we realize this impact needs to be backed by money.
Yeah.
And yeah, as all great things. But and also, I don't think necessarily that's a bad thing. I think that if you look at anything that's actually made a true impact in the way that society works, it's being backed by money and makes money.
Yeah.
And what we're working on is how we can make money sticking to our values. So we see white labeling as a great avenue. We could also do some very interesting native advertising and enterprising content. So there's ways to make some decent money. And yeah, it's something we're working on at the moment.
It's an iterative process, Johnny, as it is for all of us at our startup stage. So no worries on that.
Tell me about it, Andrew.
Absolutely. No, listen, thanks so much. It's a fascinating project, and really wish you the best of luck. And of course, I'll see you on a podium somewhere in Bristol next week.
Yeah. Exciting times.
Good stuff. Thanks again, Johnny.
Thank you, Andrew.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the LawyerFair.co.uk daily podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, why not subscribe and download each episode via iTunes or visit us on the LawyerFair.co.uk website.